Hello, and welcome to Leadership as a Philosophy, Not a Checklist. I guess this will be on Power 2. Mr. Seth from last time has been nice enough to join us again. One quick comment that happened last time after we got finished with the video is that I had a couple of questions. They said, hey, who's this Seth guy? And I talked to Seth about it, and the reason that I'm not saying here's Seth and all the things that he does and all of his credentials, and I've never talked about my credentials, is as soon as we start saying, here's our background, here's where we got our degree, here's where this happened, you're going to put us into a bunch of categories and then not listen to us. So the purpose of this discussion is to make sure that the wisdom is correct. So if you would like to know Seth's information, he'll be on LinkedIn or something, and you can email Seth and he'll tell you everything about himself. But or he cannot. So if you want to add anything to that introduction. No, you good with that?
I think that is just fine. I feel comfortable with that
What was
introduction.
it? What was it the way you said it? Because I told him, he goes, "Oh yeah, you said, oh, he doesn't know my problem because he's got that background. He doesn't know my situation."
Right.
So it's like you're
Yeah.
discounting the wisdom before you even listen.
Natural human elements.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. That's where we all gravitate to it.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
nope.
I think put the microphone a little bit lower, just so we don't overwhelm it, because I said it is a different level. So today, I'm guessing the audio could be terrible after this. So today, what we've got is we've got 3 questions that we're going to tackle. One of them left over from the last video. The first one is actually from something that Seth talked about, so he's going to answer it. First question is it the fear of losing power that prevents managers from effectively training their subordinates to be better than them? I have something to say about that, but Seth's going to answer that question. The next question is, we've talked about it several times, there's the talent that the natural talent a leader has, then we teach them the wisdom, we don't teach them a checklist, and then we have to evaluate them to make sure they can effectively handle power. So we're going to talk about how would you evaluate a potential leader. And then what's the difference between training and implementation? So giving you something for a written test and actually performing it. Those are the 3 questions we're going to cover today. So, Seth, you can start off. Is it fear of losing power that prevents managers from effectively training? Go.
I would definitely say that there is an element of that in the way that a manager behaves. That a manager does recognize that the next person may be more capable than they are, may have more talent than they do, and there is some fear that would be associated with that. I don't think that that is the main reason. I think we almost give the average manager too much credit when we say that they're probably avoiding training because of fear. They are probably avoiding training more so because they don't know how. They have no idea how to train that next person. They were never trained themselves. I think that the average manager has gotten to where they've gotten because of some stated credentials in some instances. More often than not, more so it is based off of relationships. And so they've gotten to where they are because they have relationships with the right people. And then now they're in a role that they are not fully trained for and are not able to train the next person to do what they do because they don't know how they're doing what they're doing and how best to accomplish doing what they're doing. So there's some fear driving that too. There's fear behind it, but it's more so fear of their own failure, fear of looking incapable, and their subordinates oftentimes will see that and recognize it, but they're really not prepared for the training aspect of the role. They don't put a high value on it. They don't recognize the potential in the next people. They definitely, I don't think that we could even pretend to argue against the fact that the average manager has many elements of narcissism. So they see themselves as the basis for every win. They see everyone else as the basis for every loss. And so when it comes down to it, why am I going to put my time and attention into somebody who's less than me? So while there may be sometimes that there's a little bit of conflict based off of, I think you might be able to exceed me, I think more often than not, there's conflict based off of the fact that no one can exceed me. I am the best that this job may have ever had, and I believe that putting my valuable time and attention into anyone else is not going to continue to keep me moving up that corporate ladder, that chain that I've been attempting to, because the focus is on myself, not on anyone else.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's a very standard practice, a very standard element for a manager, a person who doesn't show leadership, a person who hasn't ever been able to exemplify what true leadership should be.
Right. So those are actually very astute comments. So the first thing that I find interesting about that is there's a book that I did a video on, or that I talked about just a little bit ago, called Excellent Sheep. And it's talking about how the education process trains people to think that they're the most unique, the most amazing, the most incredible, the most everything. And then they go out in the world and they get put in charge. And so their first response is, well, I'm not the problem. I'm perfect. You're the issue. Right?
Yeah.
And so what it said in the book, which is a great line, is that what we're training are system maintainers. We're not training leaders, which is exactly what you're saying, right? They don't know how they got there. They were just really good at doing the steps that they were told to do, and because they're narcissists and everything else, they're trying to climb the ladder. So that's an interesting part. And then the other thing is what you just said about about being a narcissist is amazing, because I think maybe I've mentioned this to you before. When I'm in charge of a bunch of people, I am inherently lazy. So if I can find somebody that can do a job better than me, I give them the power and let them do it.
Yeah.
Because then I don't have to, right? So then my goal, we've said this before, my goal is to walk in and just say, man, I have nothing left to do. Everything's fine. I checked on everything. Everything's working. Nobody's cheating. Nobody's lying. I'm just going to have coffee. Now, does that ever happen? But so that's what's interesting. And so to your point, another thing that I used to say that I think is germane to what you just brought up is that I always say never pass up a chance to make somebody better. But what you just said is excellent, in that a manager thinks that they're amazing and that nobody can reach that level, so they're not going to share.
No, there's no room for delegation if you believe that you're the only person with a brain. If you believe that you're the only person who can think through situations, no matter what that situation may be, as long as it's complex, I'm the only one, you'll never delegate to anyone else. And you'll never see the flowering of a team, because that team will never be able to develop. They'll also never be able to reach their full potential. A manager holds people back. A manager holds teams back, and there's some intention in doing so. Sometimes it is, again, the fear of having somebody exceed what they've done, but oftentimes it is the fear of having all of these drones who can't think like me, who can't act like me, who can't accomplish like I can, trying to do my job. They can't do my job. There's a reason why I have my job. Like you said, it's that
I'm anointed.
That special, anointing. Yeah.
Well, and another thing that was in that book that was interesting is it said we're training rulers, not leaders. I thought that was awesome.
That is.
Because it's I'm going to sit up here and do this and this and this and this.
Right.
So so I guess this is going to lead to a different question then, or a different sort of comment. Actually, no, I'm going to save that for the end. I'm sorry. I'm thinking, well, no, I'm trying to keep this a little more organized because it's all over the place. So, okay, so I think that's a really good answer. But what I wanted to just put, okay, I got it. All right, so cool. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with that question, or is that enough?
I think I think it really well covers my thinking on it because of my experience with it. I think I've seen it from both sides more often, whether it's asking somebody to go and delegate and then seeing that they don't do it and finding out why, or whether it's being the person that things should be given to and realizing that that person in charge of our location isn't going to help me, isn't going to give me any possibility of doing what they do, and just questioning why. Why is it that they won't let me do more? Why is it that they won't give me more opportunity? And you start to see it more and more.
Yeah.
And from a psychological standpoint, you start to realize that it's pretty natural for humans to kind of gravitate to that, to think that there's something that we each inherently possess that makes us so unique that other people won't be able to replicate any of the things that we do. But I think that that is one of our biggest weaknesses. When you see that, you
Correct.
have to root that out, because
Yeah.
you have to recognize that not only can some people do what you do at a higher level than you can, but there are quite a few people who are hungry enough and motivated enough to give it everything that they've got. So even if there is some talent that you have that really sets you apart, talent gets beat by hard work all the time.
Right.
So there's people that are very, very hardworking around you that you need to develop, you need to train,
Yeah.
and you need to see what they're willing to give and willing to do. And sometimes you'll need to celebrate how impressive a feat it is that they're doing what you're doing, and sometimes at a higher level than you're able to do it, because they're just the hardest workers around. And that is another thing that normally we just don't recognize and we don't celebrate, as if we're gravitating to our base nature, that weaker side of ourselves.
Well, and so then that goes back to picking people based off of competency and nothing else, right? Can you do the job really well, and are you working really hard and you don't? Yes, okay, you get the job. You just, it's a story I love telling. So when I was in high school, I was on the varsity baseball team, real small school. And there's 20 guys trying out, and I was absolutely, I mean, I was like, on a scale of 1 to 10, I was about a 3 when it came to talent. I mean, I can hit the ball, and I can throw, and
Sure,
but
sure.
had no talent. However, I tried I practice, and at tryouts, I was out of breath. I worked the hardest. I did all this sort of stuff. So it comes time to pick the team, and they go through, and there's 16 spots on the roster. They name all 15, and I know I'm not going to get the job because I was terrible. I mean, I was just not great. Coach picks me and told the 4 dudes that didn't that they had way more talent and were lazy.
Yeah.
And they were going to keep me because I worked hard. Now, that whole season, I contributed absolutely nothing, and we won the North Section of California Championships for my high school team. But he was always like, see how he's working? You need to work that hard.
Yeah.
So I was sort of the team mascot. It was so embarrassing. But
A mascot still gets the championship.
mascot gets it. Yeah, exactly.
he still gets the
It
ring.
was so bad.
But that's something that I think that you see in the work life all the time.
Yeah.
You see these people who have always known that they're extremely talented, and they give so little because of the fact that they've always been able to just surpass others just by showing up.
Right.
But then you see the people that you really want to rely on, which is going to lead right into what you're going to talk about next. But you see the people that you really want to rely on because of the fact that they always give their all.
Yeah.
And you recognize that they're punching above their weight class. You sometimes see that they're doing more than what they even think that they're capable of. But it comes down to pure, just dynamic energy, hard work, not willing to be a failure, not wanting to accept a loss. So they outwork those other people around them. Those are the people that you just can't help but be excited to be around.
I used to say, if I fail this, it's not going to be because of lack of me not trying. It's going to be because of something else I goofed up, but it's not going to be because I didn't. And then you just mentioned about leaders. This is an interesting thing, and I'm going to talk around a story that you're going to know about. You just don't need to get specific on it. But the idea of a manager being afraid to teach or being afraid to give somebody else an opportunity or an idea. So let's just say, for instance, that you have this range of organizations. Let's say there's 15 of them, and you have this new expectation, and 2 or 3 of these organizations are exceeding that expectation by triple. And then you've got 3 or 4 that are just not doing great. and you're in charge of making those 15 organizations better. And your answer to somebody calling and saying, I need help is, I'm paying you a lot of money, figure it out. Or, which I heard that story and it made my, hair on the back of my neck. I got mad because to me, it's, well, if we have this new expectation and already there's a distribution, let me get these organizations that are triple the expectation and find out what they're doing.
Right.
Let's go down there and hang out. Let's go check on stuff. Let's go see. Let me go walk through all their stuff and see if the number's legitimate or if it's not or if it's this. Then we take those lessons and go to the 3 that aren't performing and say, here's the lessons. Or if you even want to make it more impressive, is you have those 3 organizations put together between the 3 of them, a class, and they teach it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, to me, that's the difference between leadership and management.
Right.
Not, I'm paying you a lot of money, figure it out. Let me help you out. If you're failing and I haven't done anything to help you, what am I?
Right.
You know what I mean? What am I?
Yeah.
But you got or you get one of those 3 people like you see them, they're doing absolutely everything by the book and trying everything and they're working their hardest. Like, I can't get any results. You're going to fire that person? I hope not.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're, it's not because they're sitting there going,
A manager is going to see points A, B, and C plotted out, and they're going to recognize that those are places that you need to go.
yeah.
But a manager also doesn't see any way to get there. They don't see the line in between
Very
A,
good.
B, and
Very
C.
good.
A
Very good
leader
observation.
can see that, and then that's why a leader can go back to a person that needs to be trained to go A, B through C and tell them how to go there. And a manager tends to go figure it out.
Right.
I don't know. It's a lack of knowledge.
Here's the list, do it.
Yeah. There's no discernment.
Yeah.
There's no insights. And so out of hubris, they don't even admit to it. They just go figure it out.
Yeah.
Now it's on you. It's not on me. If you fail, it's your fault.
Yeah.
If it's not me, don't involve me.
Right.
And a manager does that consistently.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. That's an interesting observation. All right. So, anything else on that? We're
No,
good?
I think we covered that.
I like that that was a 15-minute answer to a question. You gotta put your brain on to work here, man. Telling you what, there is no light thoughts here. Well, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, okay. So, scenario: the company that you work with has this new program. All right, we are going to try to identify leadership talent. We're going to send these people off to a school where we teach them nothing but wisdom and show them, here's all of the potential things that can go wrong with the power that we're giving you. And we're going to do all of these things to teach people human things, that's something that I find so interesting, is all these management courses, not a single one of them is like how to deal with humans.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So now, and we've also had them go work part-time at a store doing a certain thing. Now they're going to come to you and they're going to work with you for a month. And you have to feed back to us how you think these people will perform as a leader. Because we've taught them all this, now they have to do. So, what things would you look at when you're doing that evaluation? The reason I'm doing this is because this is I know this is what needs to happen. I have no idea how to do it. So we're going to start here. Today's the beginning.
Yeah. And I think it's a great question, and I think it's a question that leaves a lot of opportunities for a person to focus on the human aspects that are involved in picking a good leader, as opposed to just focusing on, as we've mentioned time and time again, these boxes that can just be checked off.
Right.
Because I don't believe that there is just this secret sauce that helps you to identify every good leader. And I think that the times that I've seen a person attempt to do that, where they apply what worked before to their next opportunity to promote, I've seen it fail more often than I've seen it succeed, because it needs to be different for every person. Obviously, communication needs to happen. There needs to be and rapport needs to be built. I think that oftentimes during the interview process, we focus so much on what a packet may be asking that we don't take time to look at the human being that's sitting right in front of us and see if there's something unique that they bring to the table, if there's a aspect of their personality, their character that could actually be developed and strengthened that would make them a great leader. Because I've seen great leaders who are phenomenal with other people and they build amazing relationships and they are leaders of sometimes large organizations. Then I've seen great leaders who are not so good with people and are very good with processes. And sometimes those leaders are important to an organization in specific roles as well. And then I've seen some leaders, and it's fewer and further between, that you see a leader who is great with processes and great with people, and they know when to turn one up and to turn the other down, and to apply that to each individual opportunity. And those people are going to be better used in different situations than those people that are just extremely people oriented, or those other leaders that really just can't see the good in those that they work with because they're too busy seeing how best to navigate systems and processes. So I don't think that that there's one that needs to be excluded. I don't think that there's one that needs to be favored. I think that each circumstance would apply the choosing of the right person in a totally different way every single time. And you can only find that out with, I think, pretty in-depth communication with the person that has the opportunity.
Right. So to answer that part of it, so that's why I would say they would come hang out with you and sort of shadow you for a month, right? So then you get to watch. But what I'm interested in is, you said somebody's good at process, somebody's good at people. So what I've been wrestling with is the definition, right? So the definition: leaders attune competence and environmental hierarchies in pursuit of a goal. Managers maintain systems to sustain the organization. So I think that if you've got somebody who's really good at systems, I think they're more of a management type.
I think you're right.
But then at the same time, the leader needs to understand the processes, but they're not the best at the process.
Right.
And so
So
that's an interesting,
in a specific instance,
yeah.
in certain organizations, you might be looking for a person who skews toward management.
Right.
Now, will that person be able to add better leadership qualities to them if they have a person that's willing to train and work with them? Yes, in some instances. Not everybody has true leadership
Right.
as their potential. There's a whole lot of people, if we look around this world, that you see in governments, you see as the heads of companies, you see in religious organizations, and you go, well, they never should have been in that position. The system failed them because they had no capability to be a leader. But then you see some people who are, moving along, moving up, and they've always been stronger in the pursuit of those those management qualities. And then somebody actually takes the right time with them and develops that muscle that makes them a better leader, because they always had leadership qualities. They always had it within them. They just didn't showcase it because it was never valued. It was never taught to them that was the most important thing that they should really be attempting to do. So I think that some people who fall under the management category, I think they've just been left to hang out and dry. They don't really get the opportunities that they need to have in order to become better leaders.
Right. And so that's right. And so that's an interesting comment, because the thing that I believe, and it could be catastrophically wrong. I'm willing to be prepared. I'm prepared for that. I don't want it to be that way, but is that I believe that what we got to do a better job of is, if we think that we're going to put somebody in charge of people, then we need to evaluate them for the ability to handle that power effectively. And so that's it, because I believe that you can teach anybody management, right? Now,
Yes.
We say anybody, but you can teach it, but can you implement it? That's the next part of the question. Because thoughts are. Just so everybody knows, I sent these. We've had these questions for a week. We've been thinking about them. So it's. I would love to say that I come up with these answers immediately. I'm not that smart.
You are, but you don't do it. You don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing that I believe is if you are trying to evaluate somebody on how they can handle the power and deal with the humans, it's going back to the 4 tenets or the 4 characteristics that I talk about. Are they humble, right? If we take this person, like I talked about, we put them at the lowest job in the organization, and they work there for a month, and all they do is, what can I do to make this job better? What can I do to help? And they work really hard. Okay, so they're humble, even though they're gifted and anointed, right? As we talk about. So that's humility is the first part. Do they have integrity? Do they make a mistake? Do they have integrity within themselves? Do they have the rules? All the stuff that we talk about. Do they have observable integrity? So we won't even talk about it. So, they make a boo-boo and they realize that their job is on the line because they're being evaluated for potential leadership, and they make a mistake. And you walk up to them and say, "Did you do this?" And they say, "Nah, I'm good." Right? That was your chance, and that was something small, and you lied.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
Get out of here, right? Don't lie, right? Just tell the truth. Truth will set you free. Anyway, I love the example. Had a couple of instances in a previous job where this big data privacy thing potentially happened, and the person's panicking. Well, I'm going to get fired. I said, just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. Report everything. Tell the truth immediately. Don't hide it. Don't lie. We're going to be fine. No, we're not. We're fine. Then it happened, and it turns out it wasn't a problem. And then again, and then the third time it was like, yeah, this happened, and I told the truth, and I'm fine. Right. The second you lie. Anyway, so integrity. Do you have empathy? In other words, do you try to understand? Do you make decisions? I mean, yeah, you might have to make the hard decisions. So I think that you evaluate those 4 characteristics. How do you quantify that? That's a question that somebody asked. Well, how do you measure that? Well, that's the problem. You can't measure integrity. It's binary.
Right.
Right? You can't measure humility, and you certainly can't teach it. If they're not, you can't fake humility. Right? If they come walking in, I have to be humble. Okay, how do I act humble? Start walking around. How am I supposed to act humble? Get out of here.
Yeah.
And then vigilance. Are they paying attention? Do they come walking up? Hey, I just noticed this. Is this the way this is supposed to happen? I was looking at this and I don't know. Is that if that's what we're supposed to get? Cool, but it just seems wrong. Hey, that might be an interesting thing.
Right.
Here's the problem with this evaluation method. Who's going to do that?
Right. It takes time.
Well, it takes time, but a manager's not going to do that. And that's the problem, right? You've got to have a leader that's able to look at that and say, oh, I see it. Like I said, when you and I met, in 5 minutes, we automatically knew. We knew nothing else about each other, but I could trust you with people.
Yeah.
I mean, I told you, if you had applied for the job that I got, I would have worked for you without a hesitation. That's just the way that it is, right? You just have that resonance.
Yeah.
How do you measure resonance?
Yeah, it takes a perceptive person.
Yeah.
To pay
Well, that's the
even to
vigilance
want to
part.
pay attention to it.
Yeah.
I think when it comes down to the humility, sometimes what I've run into is that when you're evaluating talent, when you're evaluating who would be best for specific roles, you sometimes will find people who have the integrity, they have the humility, they show themselves to be right for the job in ways that matter. They have the vigilance. What they lack is the confidence to make the right decisions to go along with it. And sometimes I've seen that it takes more time than any manager, somebody that is strong in the manager front, would ever be willing to dedicate to figuring it out. And I think that's why it's so important that you have a talent bench. That's why you have people who you're working with and developing before positions open up to be able to start evaluating them. You should be evaluating them for days, weeks, months, even potentially years to try to figure out if they're going to be able to put those things all together. Because you get the person that's got the humility and that is vigilant and is empathetic and is honest, and you put them in a role, but they lack that confidence to make the right decision at the right time. And then sometimes you wind up, you're always involved in every
Right.
decision that's made if you're still going to be their
then,
leader.
yeah.
And
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
and sometimes I feel like a good leader will understand that confidence can be built up, but also you need to understand if there's potential for that. If that person is bringing that to the table, or if it's going to be 2 years from now, after I've given you opportunities to make these decisions, you still will call me for a decision that we've made together in the past, and that you're, completely enabled to make. And I don't think that a manager would ever be willing to take the time that it takes to
absolutely
get
not,
there
right.
with that person. But I think that sometimes leaders too, we're kind of we're dead set that we can inspire it in our people. We're dead set that we can make sure to bring it to bear after enough time spent with them, developing them. And I think that sometimes we run into a brick wall with that because we didn't really factor that into the evaluation. And sometimes maybe we're a little overconfident in our own ability to help bring about confidence in someone else.
That's the vigilance of self.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, am I just doing this because I really want this person to win, or are they really that good?
Yeah. Yeah. I see it time and time again.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it in some instances where, I feel like there's so many different situations too that if we're talking about I'm evaluating this person against another person, but they're of a different age group, or different genders, whatever it may be that will factor into that. Sometimes what I'm looking for in one is not what I need to be looking for in the other, because they're coming from completely different perspectives. So if I try to apply what I'm looking for in the one to the other candidate, I will sometimes say no to the right candidate and yes to the wrong candidate, because of the fact that I took what the first candidate was really bringing to the table, and I said, okay, well, let's compare and contrast. Is that person bringing it to the table, and the second person isn't? They're not bringing the humility in the same way. They're not quite as vigilant. And in this case, maybe there was something underlying that they actually did much better, and they would have developed those other two things after they got into the role with good training and development from myself or another person. And I think that sometimes I've recognized that I hurt myself by making a decision that was short-sighted instead of looking at it over the long term and trying to look at these people as completely unlinked, without there being anything that would potentially come to bear from one to the other.
This is big stuff, man. So what you just did was articulate the problem even better. Because, well, no, sorry.
I think that's
because good. No, what I mean is because what I forgot to talk about is, we're doing those characteristics. Well, you can have somebody, you just said it, you can have somebody that's humble, that's paying attention, that's got empathy, but they don't have the talent.
Yeah.
And that goes back to that thing I did on the Taj Hotel. They try to find people that are good people, and they're all working at the hotel. That doesn't mean they're all leaders.
Right.
Their leaders they can get rejected. It's 7 different steps in their process before they become leaders.
Yeah.
They get looked at 7 different times.
Yeah.
Right? So the talent has to be there too, which that's even more complicated, because how do you evaluate? Because what the problem that you just identified was, you did not have a neutral standard to evaluate 2 separate people against.
Right.
Where do they have the characteristics, those 4 things? Yes. Do they have the talent? How do you measure whether or not somebody's got the talent?
I think all you could potentially do.
This was supposed to be simple.
It's never simple. And that's the best part about it. That's why we actually are able to have these conversations.
I know.
Is because there's nothing simple.
But the problem is nobody's talking about it.
Yeah.
That's what's so frustrating.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
What a manager does is they're fantastic with stereotypes. They're fantastic with oversimplification. That's what a manager is usually good at, which is why a person who is in charge of systems more so than in charge of people, go get a manager.
Right.
If you want to manage systems, get a manager who will simplify everything. But to try to do the exact same thing with a person, to oversimplify and to stereotype, to generalize, is when you get yourself in trouble, not with systems, but with people. And that's why a pure manager shouldn't be in charge of people,
Right.
because what they always do is they go, well, I gave you an opportunity and you weren't humble yesterday, which means that you won't be able to do the job tomorrow. So you're out. You're out of the running. There's got to be somebody else. You frustrated me yesterday. I'm irritated with you. I'm done with you because you didn't show, whether it's vigilance, humility, empathy, whatever, you didn't show it yesterday. And so now I'm going to show a lack of empathy too, and you're done. You're dead to me. Whereas a leader would be able to be open
And ask questions.
and ask questions and just take the time to see, does making a mistake and showing a lack of one of the major characteristics at your worst, on your worst day, does that really prove that you're not able to do that job when the job becomes available? Or does it mean that, one, maybe it needs to be brought to your attention, two, maybe I need to put more effort myself into making sure that I help you to get over that obstacle, or that maybe I just need to see you at another time in another situation to see whether or not it's a habit, a form of your character, or whether it was a one-off and just specific to that one incident.
Yeah, so that's a great example of that is, the person that gets frustrated, gets a lot of pressure, gets a bunch of things, and they've got a great reputation, and they lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
2 years of a great reputation, and then they start yelling and cussing at somebody.
Right.
Gone.
Right.
So you gotta coach. You gotta coach people on that. Say no matter what, sometimes you just gotta go. I'm going to walk away. Everybody, leave me alone for a minute. And you go away, bang your head on the desk, yell, scream, come back out, make your decision. Right? You can't do that. It's that whole thing we talked about last time. I've got all this power. How much of it should I use?
Yeah. Yeah.
Most 99% of the time, this much of it is what you should be using. You know what I mean? Because anyway, but so then how do you identify? Because confidence comes from experience and all that other sort of stuff. But the reason that I'm interested in how do you identify the talent in somebody is like we're going to talk about with the training versus implementation. But how do you? We talked about it like comedians, like musicians, like artists. They all recognize each other. Now, here's something I can tell that person's a comedian because the way they're thinking, and a comedian recognizes that. It's no checklist. There's no system. There's no nothing. So how do you recognize that somebody's got the talent? I'm thinking, I don't know if you saw the thing on the book Up the Organization that I did. In that book, the guy he's an amazing leader. Every one of his answers has humility, integrity, empathy, vigilance, and then the leadership talent is in every one of his little suggestions. And then he comes to the word L, because the thing, it's A through Z. He comes to L, says leadership. He goes, I don't know what leadership is, but if you've got a team that is performing way higher than they should be based off of their components, there's a leader there.
Yeah.
That's his definition of leadership. So that's the talent. So then the other thing is,
It's in there.
do you put this person on a team and just see how they do? If they all of a sudden end up, not running the show, but they're walking around facilitating everything, and they come walking up to you, hey, I found 3 things that, can we do this to make it easier? I went and looked at the rules. Don't break the rules. It doesn't do this and it doesn't do that, but it'll make us this much more productive and this much faster. Can I do that? Well, that's a leader, because they're trying to make the job easier while still getting the job done.
Right.
But then, so then how do you put somebody in a scenario that's not forced? Because you give somebody a written test, they can go study for the written test. Hey, when you go do this evaluation at that company, here's the scenario they're going to put you in, so here's the answer.
Yeah.
So that's...
I think what you have brought to the table and what you've mentioned on more than one occasion makes the most sense to me. And that is, you identify what you shouldn't be looking for. You identify what you shouldn't be accepting of first,
Right.
and you understand that there's certain things that you just have to immediately write off. If you hear or see some things that are unacceptable for your organization to
Right.
thrive and to succeed, then you have to have those categorically be a no. Like we won't deal with that. But at the same time, then you have to be more open-minded to the things that are going to benefit your organization than most are. And I think that what gets a lot of people in trouble when they're doing a talent evaluation is, you know what they look for?
Paperwork.
They
I'm
they
sorry.
look yes, you know that's true. But what they also look for is reminiscent of their own talent. They look for things that remind them of themselves, which is another human weakness that we tend to fall back on time and time again. But a person goes, you know what? I know this person's going to be good because when I was their age, or when I was in their position, or when I was doing that same job, I did it just like they do. And so what they're actually looking for is a sycophant. They're not looking for somebody who has the ability to make proper judgments in the right situation. They're just looking for someone who's going to try to pretend, at least, to be a clone of themselves, and is going to make them feel good about their decision making because, you know what, I basically just promoted a younger version of myself. I just promoted a person who reminds me, if I had gotten the same opportunity, oh man, I would have been phenomenal in it when I was in their position, and now that's what I'm getting again. And so, for one, that really stunts the potential for a diverse workforce, for sure, when you're just looking for things that remind you of yourself. But also, it betrays a lack of humility, because if realistically, if you think that what's best for all the jobs that you have an opportunity to fill is just more of you, I think it goes right back to, okay, well, no wonder that delegation is lacking. No wonder that the potential of your team is lacking, because realistically, all you're trying to do is fill every role with somebody who reminds you of you.
So then, right. So that's another description of the problem. If I'm looking at this, if I'm trying to analyze this correctly, that's still another angle of not having a impartial standard to judge people against.
Yeah.
Because if I figure out a way to see if somebody's got the talent, because you've had it happen before. Look, don't go over here and don't go over here. Here's what I need.
Mm-hmm.
And they come back and say, I did this, and here's the way I did it. You go, man, I would have never thought of doing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Congratulations, you're amazing. Thank you very much. You saved my day.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Because that's what a leader, you do have to give parameters, right? Because otherwise somebody's out, stealing stuff. You don't want that.
Right.
But the thing is that's where I think this evaluation process is important. And
Hugely important.
The person that asked this question has the luxury of sitting off and thinking about what I'm talking about, and then just drops these bombs on me every so often. And that was the one.
Yeah.
I said, yes, it's the weakest one because we don't know.
Yeah.
How can you detect talent? There's the questionnaire I talked about, the creativity questionnaire. If you put that to some leadership stuff, then you would end up knowing. But then how do you know? Because somebody that is a natural leader that has the good characteristics isn't going to think that they got the job because they're an amazing person.
Right.
They're going to think, well, I just happened to be the right person in the right place, and the team was supportive, and I had a great bunch of people, and all I did was do this, and it was amazing. It wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
Great. How do you find that person who's not going to brag about themselves?
Yeah.
But the thing is that there's got to be a process, right? And I think that's why I use the Taj Hotel in India, because they've got all this class training, and then they go work in every job in the hotel. And at any one of those points, somebody can say this person's no good. And then they go back to more training, and then they go work and do a middle management project. And then they come back to do more classwork, and then they go back and they start getting interviewed by the big bosses and spending time with the big bosses. 7 chances to get looked at. 7 different people are looking at you, and they'll go, no, and then if they say no, well, then thank you, you're not working here.
Right.
And so the reason that I think that that's important is because this sounds like I'm being melodramatic. Just taking somebody and putting them through classes makes people's lives miserable. You put some management person in charge of people and your turnover is way up and morale is low and people have physical problems and they call out from work all the time and they don't want to come and the employees are miserable. So people say, well, it's expensive and it's a bunch of time. I agree. However, how much money do you save if you actually take the time at the beginning and then put good people in that have the talent and the characteristics? How much do you save, and what's the reputation of your company if that's going on?
Right.
Could you imagine?
Yeah, how
Could you
much you're
imagine?
missing out on.
Nobody
and how
knows
much you're
because we're not
losing.
doing it.
Right.
It just, but
Yeah.
but that drives me crazy. Well, we've got to have a system. Systems aren't working.
Yeah. Systems
We're
aren't
here
good
'cause of
for
the systems.
people.
Right.
Systems aren't good for people.
Right.
Got to have something that is very flexible and adaptable,
Well-
and that takes into consideration these things that you're mentioning that we're talking about. I think for myself, I can definitely speak from my perspective. When it comes down to it, I know that there are a lot of characteristics that I have that are weak points. So what do I look for in evaluating talent? I don't look for someone who reminds me of me to the fullest extent of my ability. I look for somebody who has strengths in areas that I have weaknesses.
Absolutely.
I look for somebody who, if paired with me, we're going to be able to, maybe I am able to fill in their gaps, but maybe they're able to fill in mine. And now we've got this, this coverage
Absolutely.
of all of the things that I feel are important to the organization, because I know I bring some things to the table. I just also know that I don't bring everything to the table.
Right.
And I don't expect that the people that work for me are going to either, but it would be fantastic if they were able to shore up my deficiencies and I'm able to do the same for them.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I found in my career is that training works both ways. While I'm helping another person develop, I tend to develop myself. And while I am putting somebody in the right position, I tend to be improving my position as well. So I think that should all be part of that talent evaluation, looking for someone who is not just like you.
So we answer the question with a bigger question. It's hard, but
It is.
it is. But I think that's the thing. If we can figure that out, then I had somebody else just ask me about this recently. They said, "Well, this is impossible. Nobody's going to do this because everything's infested with managers that don't want to give up their power." So, well, it's the option, right? At some point, somebody's going to have to say, "Well, we've tried every system that we can think of, and we still have the same crappy results. We've got to do something different."
Right.
I think this is it.
Well, leaders are doing this as we speak. Leaders who have been doing this, leaders will continue to do this. So anybody that says, "Well, who's going to actually do this?" I'll tell you the answer. It's a good leader.
Right.
And this is not going to be revolutionary for them. This is not going to be revelatory for them. This is going to be more of the same. It's just now stated how it is that, like you mentioned, a comedian doesn't know how he recognizes, what a good comedian is.
Just see the world different.
Does it?
I love that about people. So well, but what you just said is, if you think about a place that's just infested with a bureaucracy and there's managers all over the place, they're not going to implement this because, one, you can't measure it, can't quantify it, and they don't see the benefit because they're amazing. That's that's what I'm talking about. Because a leader's going to watch this and go, "Yeah, duh." Say, "Okay, well, get your boss to do it, and get their boss to do it. Go all the way up." That's because once that happens, forget about it.
Yep.
These are great.
Okay.
No, the reason I'm frustrated is because this is why I'm not able to finish the book, because this is what I'm trying to write about. And so
you're right there, and you're putting out.
We'll figure it
that
out.
We need to talk about.
We're gonna write. Well, and that's the other thing is I'm not shy about saying I don't know. I just know that's the answer. How do I do it? Hey. I'm paying you a lot. You should figure it out. Okay, so last question, or last discussion point. And this really applies to training. I mean, it applies to leadership, but we're going to talk about music because it's a fun one. Is what's the difference between teaching somebody something versus them doing it? So, the example that I like to use. So if we're gonna accept that leadership is a talent, okay, then I'm going to treat that the same way that you would with somebody who's got another sort of creative talent like a musician. So you could, if you ever watch a violin play, Seth's got some musical history. If you go to watch somebody play a violin, that looks like sorcery to me. You know, they've got their eyes closed, their fingers are going like this, and the bow's going like this, and the most amazing music is coming out, right? So I could conceivably take a written test on the violin. You could teach me everything about what the pieces are, the strings, what the fingerboard is, the bridge, all that stuff, how to make notes, what the bow is made of, all that sort of stuff. You could teach me every conceivable factoid about a violin and then give it to me and say, now play it. And I would not be able to. I mean, I could go, and that'd be the end of it, right? You'd take the violin away, say, okay, you're done. So if that's the true for music, then it should be the same for leadership. You can talk about it because you had a great point about the test and all that sort of stuff.
100%. When it comes down to it, the people that become over analytical about leadership, saying that it can be easily quantified and you can write down on paper what needs to be done in order to be a good leader. Okay, even if that's true, take that, place it in front of another person who has never shown any capability with leadership, has never shown any proclivity to even want to be a leader or to be empathetic to people, to prove true humility, is unempathetic, and you're speaking Greek to them when it comes down to, well, this is what makes a good leader. So even if they read through it and claim to understand it, that has no bearing on executing what it is that they just took in.
Yeah.
They won't be able to, and even if they may be able to fake it for a time, to maybe come across as if they have a better grasp of it than they truly do, all it would take is just a change in circumstance.
Right.
Change one thing where, okay, well, this is the problem that you're dealing with today versus the one that you dealt with yesterday. It's slightly tweaked, and they wouldn't be able to recognize what that difference was or how then to adapt what was written down in that manual to be able to overcome, because of the fact that it does nothing to make me a leader. It only makes me know what your version of leadership is.
Right.
That's it. That's where it ends.
Yeah, and you can pass a written test on that.
Oh, totally.
You know, you remember the example that I used in, I think it was the problem chapter or thing where I talked about where there's the two women in the company that went to the same leadership program. The one was in charge of a group already that was rocking it, and she graduated almost dead last in the leadership class. And then there was the one that graduated the top of the leadership class, and everybody was terrified of her.
Right.
And they said, well, this is a bigger team, so we're going to take this woman that was the honor graduate and put, well, honor graduate, they didn't have that, but the distinguished graduate, we're going to put her in charge of that team.
Right.
And everybody's going, no, 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 no. And they did it, and then everything fell apart. And everybody goes, oh, what happened? Well, it can't be her because she's the best trained leader that we have.
Huge fallacy. Yeah, right? Huge
Correct.
fallacy.
She is the best trained.
Yeah.
She could recite back the answer to that test, no problem. Could she implement it?
No.
Absolutely not. And then they took the woman that was doing great and put her in charge of a system. And she wasn't a systems person. She had great systems people working for her, right?
Yep.
I lost my mind when that happened because it happened in an organization that I was at, and I was going, I don't even understand what just happened because everybody could see it, but they were just slaves to the system, slaves to the process. The process says this. It's got to be a way to fix that. Nope, can't fix it. So that's the example that I use. So the thing is, can you teach anybody leadership? Yes, you can teach it. Can they do it? You got to have the talent.
Yeah, you have to bring something to the table each and every time. If you're going to, I think what you do is you develop leaders. You don't make a leader because that person came to you with some of the the talent that was necessary. They came to you already ready to just be finished, right? They needed some finishing. They needed somebody
Yeah.
to help them to achieve next levels, to evolve themselves. But they're not born leaders, but they had what it took from a young age in order to be a leader, and they need someone to give them the additions
Well,
to make
born
them
with the talent,
developed.
but not the wisdom.
Sure.
That's
Sure.
that's what I think.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to interject that because people say, oh, our leader's born. Well, so they're born with the talent, but then like you said, it's got to be modulated because what does natural leadership give you? It gives you power
Yeah.
over people.
Right.
So what you got to do is teach somebody how to handle that power wisely. Because otherwise, we've talked about it. You get the big three. You get Mao, you get Stalin, you get Hitler.
Right.
Those people were all leaders.
They were
But-
born with it, but they didn't have humility, right? They had no empathy, right?
None of it, right?
Yeah.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible, right?
Yeah.
And so
They were vigilant.
well, I don't even know.
Yeah.
I don't even know if you could say that because I would say that they didn't have that either because, catastrophe was all around them and they didn't change,
That's true too.
right? So they weren't
Yeah.
paying attention. Anyway, but the point that you just made. Oh yeah. So my point is that's part of what I'm trying to do with the book reviews is I believe that what you do is the development for a leader. You find somebody with the talent, you find somebody with the stuff, and then I don't know if you saw the one I just did on Starship Troopers, but so they talked about in the book, of course it was, fiction, but they talked about moral philosophy. What was it? History and moral philosophy, where there was no grade. You had to read books, you had to write papers, you had to talk about stuff. There was no grade. The only grade was at the end, the instructor said this person gets it or they don't. And if they didn't, you were out.
Yeah.
And I still think that's what it is because it's like here you've got not that you're anointed. It's like you have the power to influence people. Here's what happens if you use that power poorly. And here's what happens, which there aren't a lot examples of power that if you use it effectively, what happens? Why? Because the great leaders don't sit down and write books because they don't think that they're amazing.
Right.
Right? So we don't have great examples, but we have a whole bunch of what not to do. That's okay. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't do any of the bad stuff, the result will either be neutral or good. Right? I think I told you before, my goal was always, I don't ever want to be on anybody's naughty list. I want to be on no list or the good list. And I'm really happy if I'm on no list because then nobody knows. Nobody's watching, right? You get on a good list, all right. But I don't want to be known for bad, right? And so that to me is the difference between training. So you can train somebody, but then they still have to go do it.
Right.
I can tell you. I mean, I remember them all. I made 3 or 4 not catastrophic, but really stupid mistakes when I was younger. And I go back and look at it, and I was really thinking about it because I hate using myself as an example. But once you can step outside yourself and go look, what really happened is I got put in places of power. People recognized that I had the ability, and I got no development. I had nobody come up and say, hey, now that you've got this power, here's what you shouldn't do. Go read these 6 books. When you get done with this one, you come talk to me. You get done with this one, you come talk. We're going to go have lunch and we're going to talk about this because you have to get it in your head. I made the mistake and then was like, well, I'm not going to do that again. And then stumbling along 5 years later, I read a book. You shouldn't have done that. And it was written 30 years before I was born. It's like, would have been nice to have had this. So because I'm the sort of person, you say, this is really bad. Okay, I don't like really bad. I'm not going to do it. But if you've never been shown that example, you don't know.
Right.
And so that's definitely the part. I went and looked just for a whim at 5 or 6 MBA programs online. Not a single one of them had anything about people. Right? Not a single one of them. But you're going to take some of the MBA and put them in charge of an organization.
Yeah.
Not knocking MBAs. Don't come after me with your pitchforks. But it's like, okay, so if we're saying that we can train people to be leaders, fine. The training is wrong then, because look at the results we're getting.
Right.
So maybe you can, but if you can, you even said it, we're just going to have to change everything if we're going to do this. But I still think it's just like I said, you can send me to teach me everything about a violin. I'm not going to ever be able to. I mean, I might, with thousands of hours of practice, get to where I could play something enough to possibly go be in a community orchestra and have them make me the 12th violin with a mute on so nobody could hear me, right? But are you going to do that with somebody who's going to be in charge of people?
Right.
You're going to go teach them and say, okay, now go do. And then you've got 3,000 hours of practicing making people miserable
Right.
before you finally figure it out. Or you're still just below average. Or you find someone with a talent and the ability and you develop them.
The best musicians that are teaching wouldn't do that. They wouldn't waste their time on someone who came to them without the talent. They wouldn't do it. They're looking for...
Yeah, they'll send you to somebody. Here's this online thing. Go do that.
They're looking for somebody to be a protege who is already showcasing talent that could potentially rival theirs with the right development, right? And that's really what a good leader should be doing too,
Right.
Without being overly judgmental, without being overly critical. But does this person have some talent that they're bringing to the table that, with refinement, could exceed anyone in this organization,
Right.
Right? And when they see that, then they need to pounce, and they need to make sure that they're putting everything that they can into it. And if not, then again, they need to not be so arrogant as to believe that they can make something out of nothing.
Right.
They're not going to generate material out of thin air.
Well,
in this case.
and I made the same mistake you made a couple of times where great person, big heart, really technically good, put that person in charge, did not have what it took to be in charge of people. And I felt bad. So I went over to him after a few months and said, look, here's the deal. I'm going to keep your pay. We're going to move you back down. I goofed. My fault. Well, I feel terrible. No, I feel terrible because I made you feel terrible. Because I put you in a thing that I knew better. I was just hoping.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I taught you everything I know. So, I told you everything I know, and so you're going to go do it. Didn't happen. And it was, I felt terrible. I mean, I really did. I was just like, I can't believe I ruined this person's morale and their self-esteem and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, oh gosh, and I never did that again.
Yeah.
A couple of times, well, they're going to be great. No, I know. No. And then, but how did you know? How did I know? That's the problem. I still don't know. But I just had a gut feeling. Maybe I did it because there was pressure. There was a bunch of a rush to promote. We need that spot filled. You're getting yelled at because that spot's not filled.
Right.
I don't have the right person. You have anybody? Well, I got somebody that's okay. Do it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, it was a gamble.
Well, but once again, gambling with somebody's life.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't want to do it.
That's the other thing that frustrates me is we call people, all these business things, they call people reports. It's like, no, those are humans.
Right.
Those are people. Right. They're not reports.
Stripping the humanity out.
Yeah, that's a number.
It's really what we do.
No.
Yeah, we got to fight that,
right?
Because that's the tendency of organizations, but that's not what's right for people.
Absolutely not. I remember once I was at a company and there was this big meeting and all this sort of stuff, and they're talking about this big time of the year and there's this huge event coming and all this sort of stuff, and this person stands up and blah, 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 numbers, numbers, numbers. Another person stands up, blah, 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 numbers, numbers, numbers. Another person stands up. The big boss, numbers, numbers, numbers. I stood up, microphone. Hey, here's the thing. None of this is going to happen without your people. You got to take care of your people. You keep an eye on your people. You make sure that they're getting rest. You make sure that they're not getting stressed. You step in if somebody's being stupid to them. You have to this is the most important time for you to take care of your people. If you don't, none of these numbers things are going to matter.
Yeah.
I got done and nobody said anything. And I was just like, we are out of control. That's the bottom line. I don't care. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Anyway. Okay, so we didn't really answer the second question, except for we're going to have to think about it some more. Which is okay.
That second question may be answered as well as it's ever going to be answered.
Well, maybe, or we just come out and say, well, if you have somebody if you get people in all of the different places in your organization, because this is the other thing that's missing in organizations, or that I think we've talked about, is I think, and this is going to sound, every time I bring this up, somebody says I sound like a socialist. I think that if you've got somebody that's a natural leader, pay them appropriately, but pay them the same level for the people that they're working with if they're, at a different tier, because that's their talent and they're really good at it. You don't need to pay them 3 times the amount, because what happens? That money then attracts people that want lots of money. And so instead of saying, hey, this person's got the leadership ability, you get this job if you're a leader and that's it. But you get this job if you're really good at the system, and you get this job, and they're all sort of similar, right? But the thing that's got to change is that you got to have the leadership types at every level, because then they're able to check on all of that and come down and make sure that these people are being evaluated correctly and all that other stuff. But it can't happen if you just have a leader here and then everybody else. Remember the blanket of bureaucracy that I did? If you got this bunch of bureaucrats, that's not going to help the organization. You got to break through all of that.
Yeah.
And then, you might even have to have, I think I even had that in one of my examples, you got to have a leadership type and a systems type at the very top. We got to have a CEO. Well, okay, you might have the person that's the expert system, and the CEO has final decision-making authority, and so you pay them a little bit more. But, I saw some CEO of a company last year made $65 million. And I'm going, it's a free country. Pay people what you want. I don't care. But are you sure that person brought $65 million worth of value?
Right.
Or do you give that person, well, I don't know, $20 million and take that other $40 million and give everybody in the company a $5 an hour pay raise?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And like I said, at which level are you going to attract the most talent that is going to do the most for your company?
Right.
And I don't believe that for the most part, organizations are thinking about that from that standpoint. They're thinking about it from the standpoint of, okay, but if the head of the company is the most attractive to a bunch of other organizations and we're able to snare him or her, then that makes us better than those other organizations, without thinking about the foundation and everything that leads to that one
all the
important person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. And then at the same time, I mean, we sort of talked about that before. We've been both in organizations where there's somebody that's sitting remotely over somewhere, part of the country, that's the so-and-so of this department area, whatever, and they're making a ton of money, and they have never done one single thing to contribute to your success.
Right.
And you're going, what do you I'm not saying, like I said, pay what you want, but are you really getting that much value out of that person?
Gotta stop and think about that too. If you're willing to evaluate talent at every level, how you need to evaluate value.
Well, and if I want to
every level,
and if I want to attract, like you said, if I want to attract the best people, well, let's just say you're in a company that's got 10,000 employees. I don't know. I'm just making up numbers. And you're trying to get that beautiful person. Okay, so you're spending all this money on that one person. How much work are they doing? So you say, we attracted the best talent. Okay, great. What about the 9,900 people that are all the way down here doing all the work? What happens if you attract 9,900 talented people?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I think good CEOs would tell you that. I may be the figurehead for this company, and I've made some difficult decisions, some important decisions, but I'm really not the most important part of this company.
Right.
A good CEO would tell you that. So then
and
that means there's people out there thinking like that. So that means that there probably needs to be some changes.
WorldCom and Enron and all the people during the financial crisis. I'm actually doing a video in February on the financial crisis.
Good, because there are
all
Enrons
of those people
that haven't been labeled as Enrons right now as we speak.
They just haven't been exposed.
It's coming. It's in the near future. We're going to see.
Well, and that's the problem, right? All of those people had all of the certificates. They had all the stuff. That we're getting this person because they're going to do that. Yeah, and look how many. Well, millions of people got destroyed in the financial crisis because of a whole bunch of people that were absolutely had no integrity, didn't have any empathy, didn't have any humility.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
I think one of the guys left and he got, after all the bonuses, even after the company went out of business, got $85 million and ran everything into the ground. It's like,
Yeah. Where was the value added
right,
there?
right, right. And like I said, I'm not trying to. Everybody says you sound like a socialist. I just said pay the CEO $20 million. You know, they don't. I don't know what somebody's doing that earns them $65 million.
Right. Right. You're definitely still a capitalist. What you're talking about, though, is something that just needs to be.
Well, I mean, we talked about it.
down.
One little thing, just because it's absolutely not related to the questions. I think we talked about it in the last video. It still frustrates me. You attract top talent, and then you go, okay, we're going to get somebody to just attract top talent here. So next thing you've got 3 of these people that think they're amazing. So then they want 4 different pieces of information in 6 different formats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they all want it from you. Well, who's the person that goes in there and says, no, 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 no.
Right.
You tell me all the information that you want. We're going to put it together in one format. I'm going to give that to them to fill out. And then you take your $65 million butt and come down here and get the information yourself.
All right.
Right? I'm not going to make the person that we're paying the least do the most work. If you're going to work, if you're going to have this much money, you're going to do some stuff, right?
You would think that would make sense. You would think that would make sense. But
it does.
Yeah.
Right?
$65 million really just enables people to
Then everybody's just climbing
really
for the
be
money.
button pushers
Yeah.
and never actually get their hands dirty.
Right.
Because I mean, right off the bat, if I think of somebody that's making that amount, I don't picture somebody who's working the hardest. I don't picture somebody who is bringing the most value. I picture somebody who is just untouchable in a situation where, you know, whatever they demand must be brought to them. That's
Well,
it.
and I saw it was another company where the CEO, so the employees are making minimum wage or just above it, and it's a big software company, and the CEO made $45 million. Didn't write a note, didn't write a single bit of code, didn't write any of this sort of stuff. None of it.
Yeah.
None of it. Didn't even found the company. Just got brought in and got all this lavish stuff because this person's so important.
Right.
Come on, right? It's like, anyway, so.
In and of itself, because of the fact that that CEO is supposed to be a great leader, right? You don't pay somebody that amount unless they're a great leader. But inherently, just by making that amount, can you truly tell me that that is a humble, empathetic person? Because they've already made decisions that have proven that they're not.
Yeah.
So then the things that matter to leadership aren't even being manifested at the level that, you know, this is the exemplar. This is the person that we look to for leadership. And they've already, just by signing their name on the contract to take that role, they've already been taken out of the ability to be a true leader. So what do you wind up with?
Person that's running the system and chasing money.
And the organization then falters. Yeah. Right.
Well, I was trying to, because I was talking to somebody. I said, I wonder, if I was that person, sheesh, what would I do? I would say, well, here's the way this will work. If you're willing to pay me $45 million or $40 million, here's the deal: pay me $1 million, and then here are all of the bonuses that I get. So if I was the board doing this, I'd say, you're going to get this number of bonuses. And the bonuses are like 8 different categories. And all of the 7 of them are people. And 1 of them is financial. And you don't get the bonus until all 8 of them are better.
Yeah.
So if turnover goes down, if retention, blah, blah, if the morale, this and this and this, if all that gets better and we still make money, then you get these bunch of bonuses. And hey, 10, 15, 20. Okay, if you're willing to do 4 million or 40 million, well, sure, you get all these bonuses if all that stuff happens. But they're all people oriented, so you can't fake them. That's not socialist. That's just good for the people, right?
Yeah. Non-guaranteed money. Sometimes I think it's a much better motivator.
And
tons of organizations.
And because if you tell somebody this is what you have to do, and they're greedy for money, but stuff you can't fake, well, that takes a different type of person to do it.
Yeah.
Because if it was me, I would say, well, I'm going to do all that anyway, so I'm getting the bonus, but not because that's my goal. I want the people to stay. I don't want turnover to be high. I want to have more. I want to have good morale. I want to, these are all things I want in the company anyway. So then you're attracting real talent. Instead, it's, hey, you got the stock price to go up. $10, so you get $10 million bonus.
Yeah.
Well, how did you do it? Did you grind everybody to dust?
Right.
Did you piss everybody off? Did you do the blah 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 blah? Is the morale of your company in shambles, and you got your stock price to go up $5?
Yeah.
That's not worth it in my mind. But to some
It
people,
doesn't seem like it makes sense. I mean, completely close to being completely separate, but in Major League Baseball, 10-year contracts with potential for, close to hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, guaranteed contracts. There are multiple examples that we could point to of people that once they received it, they did much less than they did before they received it, right? It happens regularly. You get a 10-year contract, and some of it has to do with athleticism. We know athleticism tends to fade as you get a little bit older, but some of it has to do with just being complacent. I'm satisfied now. If you give me $160 million and tell me that no matter what I do over the next 10 years, it's mine, I'm not going to work as hard as that person who is living paycheck to paycheck and looking for their big shot. And so we do that at high levels with organizations of a totally different nature, but it has the exact same result. If you give me that much money and you tell me that it's guaranteed money, whether my organization performs well, whether my people are extremely satisfied, whether I'm recruiting the best talent, whether I'm preparing this company for the next 10 years to be, the best that it can possibly be, even if I am a hard worker and even if I am normally very dedicated, it takes the edge off. It really does. It definitely does. I become very satisfied. I become very complacent. Sometimes it's not even very complacent, but I lose some of what brought me there. The fire that drove me is lost.
Yep. Well, every job that I've taken since I got out of the military, I never negotiated for a salary. I just took what I got. And I said, I'll prove I'm worth more.
Yeah.
And then I always did. But, that, I say, oh,
it's a great way to do it.
I appreciate your offer. I'll take it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. You'll give me a raise. Don't worry.
I love that.
Yeah. But it's not cocky. It's just like, I'll show you that you don't know what you've got.
Yeah. You never lost your drive. You never lost your fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it wasn't, we're going to, just like you said, that's an absolutely astute point. I mean, I remember, I'm not going to say what football team because then I get judged by, but there's a team that I follow, and one year they picked up a guy, and his contract was he got $1 million if they won a game, and if they lost, he got nothing. And they went to the Super Bowl that year, and then he had $5 million if they won the Super Bowl. So he ended up with whatever it was. I think they were 14-3 or 13-3 that year. So he made 18 or 19 million dollars. Perfect.
Yeah.
Right. And you could see him on the sidelines hyping people up.
Yeah.
But it's not because he was thinking of the money. He was that. But that's a great.
Yeah.
Here's what you've done. Right. Not just because you're a systems person, or we're going to give you this because we're trying to. Anyway, we've battled. Okay. I think this is good. I think we went longer than normal, but that's fine. Do you have anything else?
I enjoyed it. I don't need to talk anymore. I think I did enough talking, but I really appreciated it.
No. I appreciate your time. We may make this. The last one of these videos was one of the highest viewed that I have. I'm still not making any money, so I'll give you a cut.
I appreciate that.
I'll give you a cut of what I'm getting.
Fantastic.
Actually,
I'm motivated.
I gave you paper. But no, I mean, if people like these, maybe we'll try to do them once a month or something.
Sounds fun.
Just because it's, I think we get enough things to talk about. And it helps to talk because you made a couple of points that crystallized what I was thinking. As soon as you said it, I was like, yes, but I hadn't thought it. So
yeah, cool.
Alrighty. I appreciate you guys that have stuck around, and thank you so much for your time. And if you like this, leave a comment, whatever your predilection is, and hopefully we'll keep these things going. So have a good day.